What's going on, everybody? I'm Chapla, founder of Powlax and creator of Powlax Master Coach, and in this video I'm excited to bring you guys one of the most popular man-down defensive strategies in the game called the 5-man rotation. So the 5-man rotation, or 5-man, is pretty much a man-to-man defense where our players are going to be in a constant state of recovery, so they're going to have to change their matchups, and it's going to be very fast-paced. The 5-man is extremely versatile. It can be used against any type of man-up offense, and you can use it to apply pressure or be a little bit more conservative with your defensive man-down strategy. So the 5-man rotation works based on wherever the ball is and who is defending the ball and how we relate to that player. So we're going to start this video by going over the assignments that everybody has in relation to the defenseman playing the ball. Then we're going to show you exactly how this builds up into a good defensive strategy, and then show this strategy to you against an open set, a 2-3-1, and a 3-3 man-up offense. And finally, we're going to finish up by showing you how to handle rotations, how to handle going from one set into the other, and finishing up by showing you a couple of the main mistakes that players make and what you'll want to watch for with your players. To show you how it works and discuss the rules for each player, we will run it against an open man-up offense. The basic principle of the defense is that the 5 defensive players will rotate to cover all 6 offensive players. If we add in a hexagon where all of the corners represent the 6 offensive players and a star in the middle where the corners represent the 5 defensive players, as the ball moves, watch how the star rotates to cover all 6 offensive players, with the top point of the triangle starting on M2 and ending up playing M1. As these players move, every player in the rotation will have responsibilities based on their position in relation to the defenseman who is playing the ball. We will start on ball and work from there. First, we have the player on ball, DM1. The on-ball player's only job is to play the ball carrier. The other 4 defensive players are responsible for covering the other 5 offensive players, so we can strategize how our on-ball player will play. In the same way that man-up offenses time up their plays by getting everyone a touch, we can time up our pressure by scouting our opponents to throw a wrench into their offensive plans by applying pressure at just the right moment. Second, we have adjacent players, D1 who is left and the LSM who is right. These adjacent players have 2 responsibilities. Their most pertinent responsibility is to cover the player adjacent to the ball carrier, and their second responsibility is to fill the skip passing lane to the next player. So here, D1 is responsible for M1 and the passing lane from M2 to A1. The LSM is responsible for M3 and the skip lane to A3. These players will stay with their men as they rotate within their offensive sets. Finally, we have the 2s. D2 is the left 2, and D3 is the right 2. They will not need to say left and right when calling out 2 because that will be implied by where they are on the field. These players are responsible for splitting the remaining 3 players on the field. So, D3 will be responsible for A3 and half of A2. And D2 will be responsible for A1 and half of A2. A scenario that may mix up these players is the pass from M2 all the way to A2. In that scenario, D2 and D3 will need to communicate and figure out who is on ball, who is adjacent, and all the other players will need to match up according to the decisions that they make. As the ball moves around the perimeter, the players' responsibilities are going to change based on their relationship to the on-ball defender so that they can cover all 6 players. We will go over a quick example based on where the ball is now with M2 and 2 passes, M2 to M3 and M3 to A3. We will start with their initial assignments and then add in the passes. To start the drill, we have DM1 playing ball with M2. The LSM is right and is responsible for M3 and the skip lane to A3. D1 is left and is responsible for M1 and the skip lane to A1. D2 is the 2 and is responsible for tracking and being able to play A1 and A2, and D3 is also the 2 and is responsible for tracking and being able to play A3 and A2. As the ball moves, everyone's responsibilities will change and then change again. DM1 will rotate from the ball to become left on the first pass and then 2 on the second pass, and he will be responsible for splitting M2 and M1 up top. The LSM will rotate from right to become the ball on the first pass and then left on the second pass and be responsible for M3 and the skip lane to M2. D1 will rotate from the left to become 2 on the first pass and then 2 again on the second pass and be responsible for splitting M1 and A1. D3 will rotate from being the 2 to becoming the right on the first pass and then ball on the second pass and be responsible for playing A3 with the ball. D2 will rotate from being the left 2 to become the right 2 on the first pass and then right on the second pass and be responsible for A2 and the skip lane to A1. I saved D2 for last because it brings up a highly debated point in man-down defense. If another pass is made and A2 gets the ball, do you want your players to go play the ball at X? For me, the answer in a 4-man or 5-man rotation is yes, because I feel like a good feeder behind the goal can shred a defense if he's left there to survey the field for too long. So here, we're going to have him go and play the ball. If we switch up the strategy and don't have him go play the ball behind, he will still track this player, but he will stay above the goal and shadow the player at X and wait for him to pick a side and then play the ball. The key to running a good 5-man rotation is that all of the players are on the same page and they learn to recognize their assignments and react efficiently to whatever the offense is doing. You can train this really well by running 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, 4-on-3s, and 5-on-4s that build up into your man-down defense and really just focus in on the rotations and the assignments of every player. The other really big thing I have to mention is that all the players have to understand and know that we are in a rotation-based defense, because if one player decides to hold in a zone-type principle because he thinks that just because he can play the other player that it's a good idea, every single other player in our defense is going to have to know that that player held and then read where they are on the field again and reassess exactly where they are. And this can cause massive amounts of confusion if our players understand the rotation but then have to change whatever they've been thinking about because one player decided to hold. The other big thing is now, since we're moving away from our open set into sets that are going to have a crease player, the one important thing with these is that you're going to have to understand how we're going to rotate out of the crease, because as we're rotating, we're going to have to rotate in and then out, and players are going to need to understand that for all of these different sets. So let's get right into the 2-3-1 set and show you how it works. When playing against a 2-3-1 man-up offense, there are only 5 perimeter players on the offense, which creates one basic difference. The defensive players will not rotate per se as the ball moves around. They will maintain their outside matchups, but when each player is in the 2 position, they will be spidered in all the way to cover the crease, just like they would be in a regular offensive set. The 5-man rotation against a 3-3 also has the exact same rules and is extremely similar to the open set, but there are 2 aspects that trip up a lot of teams. First, we need to reevaluate the rotation to account for the crease player, but it works in the same way. When the ball is at side right with A3, all 4 players on the right half of the field should be covered. D1 is actually our only real 2 because the skip pass to M1 is unlikely, so DM1 can concentrate on M2. But once the ball moves up to M3, our second 2 is apparent. D2 needs to recognize that he is now splitting A1 and A2 so that he is ready to rotate when the time comes. So, as the ball moves to A1, D1 will go up to cover M1, D2 will get out to play A1, and D3 will get in and cover the crease and A2. The second issue happens when the ball is up top with M2. If we abide by our rules, D2 and D3 need to be splitting A1, A2, and A3. But that's a lot of distance to cover when M2 is likely this team's best feeder. So the 2 crucial elements here are that the LSM and D1 need to make sure that they do not overextend while playing M3 or M1, and that they can help on the skip passes to A3 and A1. The second and probably bigger issue of the 2 is that D2 and D3 must communicate when they are going to leave A2. They should try to hold as the ball is reaching their side, because it will be easier for the adjacent player on their side to be in a passing lane. For example, as the ball swings from A3 to A1, D2 can stay inside covering the crease for a little bit longer because D1 should already be in a good skip lane, whereas the LSM just had to play M3. Now we're going to cover exactly how we want to handle rotations or transitions from one set into another. The rotation that we are going to cover is a 3-man wheel. Everyone has different terms for it, but it's really easy to understand. The play starts when A3 receives the ball at side right. A3 will carry up the field, M3 will cut to the crease, and A2 will float out to the right side. My thought process on this or any rotation is to remain true to the rules of the defense and create as little extra thinking as possible. So for us, we will have all adjacent players on rotations stay with their men. So here, D3 would stay with the ball on his carry, the LSM would stay with M3 on his cut to the crease while showing towards the ball, and D2 would follow A2 out. This way, the only players who have to reevaluate where they are in terms of our own rotation are the 2 players who were in the rotation but weren't on ball. DM1 and D3 will simply rotate in the same way that they would have on a pass from A3 to M3. The biggest mental challenge here is that the LSM needs to realize that he is now a 2 and is responsible for A1 and M3, but as long as the defense communicates effectively, D2 should remind him as the ball moves to the left side. Now we're going to discuss what we want to do if a team moves from one set into another. For example, We will have the offense move from a 3-3 into a 2-3-1 into an open set and talk about what changes in each. As we move through this, there are 3 things that we need to emphasize with our players: recognition, communication, and decision. Players need to recognize the movement, communicate where they are in relation to the on-ball defender, as well as any cutters, rotations, or new assignments, and decide whether we are going to stay in this defensive strategy or transition into a new one. For the most part, the 5-man rotation can handle any situation, and we should be able to flow into and out of sets rather efficiently. We will start with a 3-3 and the ball swinging around from A3 to A1. As A1 catches the ball, A2 gets out to X and M2 cuts to the crease, and A1 passes to A2 behind. The first thing we have is recognition. D3 needs to recognize that A2 is leaving the crease and get out to play him. DM1 and D1 to recognize that M2 has cut to the crease and make sure to spider in to play him as the ball rotates. Next, we have communication. DM1 and D1 should yell cutter while D3 announces that he is getting out behind. All the other players should be yelling their positions as well. Now, as the ball swings up the right side to M3, M2 is going to back out to top left spot, and M1 is going to move to the middle of the field, creating an open set. Here, we're going to rely on D2. D2 needs to recognize that M2 is moving off of the crease and account for him like he would have already. Because M2 is moving away from D3, who also is splitting him, D3 needs to recognize that he is no longer responsible for M2 and needs to pick up A1 as well. The most common mistakes I see players in a 5-man rotation make come in 3 basic forms. The first is that they simply don't understand a rotating defense. So what players usually do is they just think that they have their player on the outside, then they have to spider in to cover the crease. But what if there is no crease? They have to understand that they may need to go play another player. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when offenses run plays that have a lot of motion. The key here is that players just need to stay within their rules. If you're backside on a 2, you need to account for 2 players. If you're an adjacent, you need to stay with that player and try to fill a passing lane. If you're on ball, you need to make sure you're playing the ball. These rules will keep us accurate within pretty much any offensive play that they can run. And if we see it once and it works, then we can react to it quickly the second time. The third and final mistake that I see players make all the time is they just don't communicate. In a lot of scenarios, we have a player who is extremely smart, knows everything, and can really direct the defense. And that player is hugely important when running man-down defense because as an offense decides to run some rotations that may confuse other players, he can then direct them in the right fashion. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it's given you a very clear picture of how the 5-man rotation works. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for me, you can email me at patrick@powlax.com. If you want to learn more, check out all the other videos on powlaxmastercoach.com. If you really enjoyed the video, make sure to share it. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.